Welcome to this year's Tales of the Cocktail. In a nutshell, I'm Jenna Ba. I'm a baobab-obsessed whiskey lover. And I'm really passionate about our world of flavor. Love how ingredients and methods reflect history and culture. And I think they have the potential for cultural diplomacy. So in the next hour or so, I kind of pass the mic to some flavor advisors to help us all discover creativity, ingenuity, and fusion based on African indigenous ingredients and techniques stemming from Africa and at the heart of the global Pan-African diaspora. So when I say Africa, I think about diversity, so much diversity. It's the second largest landmass on Earth. It's home to 54 countries. Yet, so many of the bartenders I encounter daily seem to have minimal knowledge and exposure to appreciate and interact with many of these plants, fruits, herbs, barks from the continent. So this is the beginning of a small attempt to address that. I've got some really interesting facts for you guys. The South African Research Council, they identified 4,000 species. They say, okay, these have like a clear economic potential for the world of food and drinks. They still have another 24,000 to assess. That's from the idea of like diversity, yeah. 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land is on the continent of Africa. Plus than that, like the yield and the processes and the production of the one that is cultivated in terms of increasing in fairly sustainable ways is just really massive. Then capability, human capital, as to be called. There's so much incredible indigenous knowledge. And plus over half of like Africa's 1.2 billion people are full-time seasoned farmers. Not even touching upon this, like the youngest world demographic, and so many of people are getting into technology and product creation. Last but not least, it's always harvest time. There's so much variation in geography and weather, which can literally be taste on the palate. And hence my message that you should get acquainted with the flavors of Africa. Now, African ingredients and cuisine are yet to explore on the global flavor world. I believe that conversations as the one to follow are needed. So we are kind of aware of the cultural identities, of indigenous knowledge, of Black entrepreneurship. And within the hospitality world, we clearly move away, hope so, from cultural appropriation and into cultural appreciation. Now, the title of the seminar is called Pan-African Ingredients Stories, Pan-African Flavor Stories. Now, Pan-Africanism is a worldwide cultural movement of solidarity and community between all indigenous people and diaspora groups of African-born and African descent. The power of Pan-Africanism in the food and drinks world lies within its diverse and unique indigenous knowledge systems. How can they be not really unified, but amplified and supported? And how can more people have access and be inspired by these knowledge systems? Because our world of food and drinks in general have this valuable capacity of telling stories. Stories that too often go untold. Story of tribes, stories of communities, of migration, of displacement, but of perseverance. Stories of our families and our ancestors. In West Africa, the griots, they are the storytellers. Like when somebody passes away, somebody is born, there'll be a griot that comes and tells the story of the family, the story of the community. They are poets as well. And they are keepers of history, oral as it is. Inspired by the griots, put together a group of chefs, flavor entrepreneurs, and bartenders who all have a story to tell about the world of ingredients, but the world beyond the ingredients that they will touch about. Now, do remember that these ingredients, they evolved with us, as our ancestors ate these plants' ancestors, preferentially selecting the most nutritious and delicious among them. So there is an intertwining in between what we grow, what we pick, what we eat, what we transform, and who we really are. But let me introduce you to the crew. Zoe Adjonyoh, chef, writer, and entrepreneur, founder of Zoe's Ghana Kitchen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Jackie Summers, a man with many hats, writer, activist, and entrepreneur, founder of Sorel Liqueur.
What's going on, Jenna? Good to see you.
John Gakuru, a mentor to many in the drinks industry and founder of Naivasha Coffee.
Thank you so much for making time. This is a real pleasure.
Reggie Mthembu, bartender and brand ambassador, an avid community builder in his native South Africa.
Hello, guys. I hope everyone is well. I'm grateful to be here.
Tunde, chef and food investigator, an autodidact in cooking and political theory, examining the ecosystems of ingredients and their ways of travel within the world.
Hi.
Seth, awesome. Bartender, passionate about working with local African ingredients, and world-class Nigeria winner of 2021.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. So super excited to be here. Thank you.
Sheldon Raju, adventurer and chef, semi-finalist for San Pellegrino Young Chef of Africa.
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for the platform.
Would like to invite everyone to listen to Zoe and find out a bit about her journey within. Zoe actually wrote a book about ingredients from Ghana, and I often buy spices from her shop, so I'm like really keen to hear about the ingredients she wants to present to us and her journey within Flavour and African ingredients.
Hello, my name is Zoe Adjonyoh. As you said, I'm the founder of Zoe's Ghana Kitchen. I have a cookbook by the same name, Zoe's Ghana Kitchen. And yeah, so Zoe's Ghana Kitchen has been extolling the virtues of West African ingredients for the last 12 years, really. I set about a mission 12 years ago to, it's kind of a clumsy set of words now, but at the time it seemed to make a lot of sense, which was to bring African food to the masses. Of course, I meant the masses who weren't already acquainted with it. So slight edit there. But so over the last 12 years, that's what I've been doing, cooking West African flavors, West African food, very much through the lens of Ghana, where my father's from. I want to talk about today a little misstep in my journey, because over the course of, let's say, the 10 years of the last 12, what I was doing was encouraging people to have a relationship with these ingredients and flavors, because I thought they were amazing. And because I thought this was a doorway, an entry point into people having a relationship with the culture and exploring more of what Ghana could be, what Ghana is, and to unlock further doors to West Africa, to Africa as a continent, and help perhaps break down stereotypes that existed in the West around what this food was, and also whether or not it was healthy or not, because there's quite a big misconception in the West and in the diaspora, frankly, about whether our food is healthy or not. In the last 2 years, much of my work before the pandemic was bringing that food to people, right, to wake them up to it in the traditional ways, but also in new ways and inventive and creative reimaginings of how we use our ingredients. But over that time, the narrative I was using was all about ingredients, ingredients, ingredients. In some misguided and naive way, I thought that that meant I was helping transfer wealth back to the continent, right? Because people would have to purchase these things from the continent. In the last few years, what's become apparent to me is that actually, the white West gaze on health and flavor has stepped up remarkably fast to try and co-opt those ingredients and flavors. So in the last 2 years, I've turned my platform into an online shop so that I could have a direct relationship with the co-ops, farmers and producers, have a sustainable and transparent supply line, and know that the people who have been working with these ingredients for centuries through our ancestors get to benefit, get the financial reward from the ingredients. So I'm slightly changing the narrative on that conversation and focusing more down on the ways that, you know, the hospitality industry, for example, could be using these ingredients, or people could use them in their home. It's almost a similar conversation, but the encouragement is to buy black and to buy African when you're playing around with these ingredients, and not buy it from Monsanto and Unilever and so on and so forth. So these ingredients range from anything from grains of Salem, alligator pepper, cubeb, baobab, moringa, iru, which we call dawa dawa in Ghana. They all have amazing, amazing health properties and virtues, and have traditionally for many, many thousands of years been used for that, even before flavor. They've been used, food has been medicine before it's been a focus on the flavor, right? Anyway, so today I want to talk about moringa because, strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, moringa is one of these ingredients that the White West still wants to try, doesn't know enough about itself and hasn't found a way to monetize itself, so is still super cautious about letting you talk about it in terms of health benefits on a public platform. Like Instagram, for example, doesn't allow me to sell moringa through my shop online, which is very weird because you can buy spirulina and wheatgrass and any other similar kind of ingredient that, you know, the West has already monetized very well, but they're very, very similar types of ingredient, right? So, okay, anyway, let's talk about moringa. So yeah, we know, what do we know about moringa? We know that it's, in terms of the flavor profile, it's like wheatgrass, it's like kelp, it's like spinach. It has that grassy kind of profile to it. It's perhaps not the most palatable thing in its raw form, but it is eaten and consumed in its raw form, oiled and steamed. But the most common preparation is in its powdered form. So it gets, the leaves get ground and dried and into a powder. And so what can we do with that powder? Well, apart from the obvious things, right? The obvious things are to put it into smoothies, in like healthy breakfast options. You can bake with it very easily. I make a beautiful focaccia with it. But beyond simple preparations like that, we also have moringa oil, which is traditionally used for skincare and hair care, but I actually use, the oil has a beautiful flavor profile, and I use it as a finishing oil in the same way I would use a very, very fine olive oil, for example, from Italy. And like baobab, it has, I'm going to get a bit like technical and talk about science and stuff a little bit for a second. So in terms of what are the nutrients and things like that contained? Okay, so it has vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, calcium, iron, protein. It has 8 essential amino acids that humans don't produce themselves, so we need to consume from other sources. It has 46 different antioxidants. It has more than 90 nutrients. So to compare it, it's just, you know, like everybody talks about turmeric, for example, as being this great anti-inflammatory. Moringa does the same, but more in terms of anti-inflammatory. So it's useful for fighting Crohn's disease. It's also useful because it has more vitamin C than oranges, which are obviously more difficult to grow. It has more magnesium than eggs. It has more vitamin B3 than peanuts, more B2 than bananas. It has, you know, it's able to stabilize blood sugar. It's able to control insulin levels in patients with diabetes. It has this abundance of health properties. And for example, you know, in 8 ounces of milk, you get about 300 to 400 milligrams of calcium, but in like a teaspoon of moringa, you get more than 4,000 milligrams of calcium. So you can see, like, because of the density of the power of the nutrients and antioxidants of this ingredients, it makes it an amazing, like, literal superfood. It is an amazing superfood. So what I want people to do then is use it as an ingredient, because we can sneak this into our diets really seamlessly, whether it's drinking tea, which is a really simple preparation, either steeping the leaves or mixing a teaspoon of the powder into, you know, hot water, adding some ginger and lemon. Or we can make a delicious moringa pesto, right? Or we can make, as I've said, lots of smoothies. You can bake it into all your like nutrient-dense healthy bars, if that's what you're into. You can bake with it. You can put it into cocktails. There's lots of extrapolations of what you can do with that one ingredient. And it's way more cost effective than buying lots of supplements. It's better for you than trying to, from a cost perspective, but also from a biodiversity perspective. Because it's such a drought resistant crop, it's very easy to grow in hot climates. So as long as we're making sure that, you know, farmers aren't relying solely on that one source of income in case there's some pestilence that happens, and you know, they're doing it in a way that is biodiverse agriculture, there is a lot of money to be made from moringa for moringa farmers. And I'm very, very happy to see that people like True Moringa, for example, do great, amazing products. They make perfumes, body scrubs, oils, face oils. There's so many extrapolations for it beyond food. But with food, yes, this moringa deliciousness is not only incredibly good for you, it's a very, very cost-effective ingredient in terms of a health supplement. And it's also a really cost-effective ingredient if you're cooking with a conscience about the health of the consumer at the end, or if you're a home chef or a home cook and you're concerned about health and how to give your body the best immune boosting nutrients. Moringa and baobab together are incredible. Moringa on its own is wonderful also. So yeah, I think I would love to see more chefs cooking with these types of ingredients and telling their customers and their clients about these benefits, the health benefits. So I think increasingly people are looking for genuine health, you know, products that don't just talk about being healthy, but just 100% are, and are additive free and are natural. And I think people are in the future are going to be wanting that experience, not just at home, but in dining out. So yeah, that's my pitch for moringa. We know from anecdotally, not just anecdotally actually, but for 4,000 years it's been used in Ayurvedic medicine, and for a similar amount of time, if not longer, in Africa for the same reasons. And you know, like rice, I expect that the story of the African intellectual and the African science that has gone into all of the learning that's gone into how to farm this in a stable way and for the best propagation of the seed. You know, what I hope doesn't happen, as happened in rice many hundreds of years ago, is that we get erased from the story of it, because Africans have been growing this, learning about its health properties, extolling the virtues of it long before superfoods were trendy and you know, wellness was a health craze. So I encourage anybody who watches this who's interested in buying moringa to buy it from, please, I beg, an African producer and source. That's my pitch. Moringa, go get it.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, what an incredible ingredient. And in the handout, Zoe is going to share with us some of the some recipes and how to use it, guys. So it's great. Thanks, Zoe. Should we move next and find a bit about Jackie Summers and his entrepreneurial story and the ingredient that's like so close to his heart that he dedicated quite a long part of his of the last decade working on a product from this ingredient. Jackie?
So the first thing I want to say is it's such a great honor to be on with people from all over the diaspora. It is a pleasure to see you all and to know that we are doing this work in so many different places. I make a hibiscus liqueur called Sorrel, which is obviously based on the Caribbean favorite sorrel. But what I try to tell people is, this is not my story. Sorrel has been around for 500 years, and it was around for thousands of years before that. Brands have tried to identify the hot new flavor for years, and every year they come up as hibiscus as a hot new flavor. But there's more in it for us than just the flavor of this. This was sacred. This was tradition. This was medicine. This was cultural. Hibiscus has so many health benefits. It's a natural antimicrobial. It's a natural antioxidant. It's a natural antifungal. It's good for digestion. It's good for skin. It's good for all sorts of things. And in Africa, again, for thousands of years, they would use it for ceremony. They would make this tea. And if I'm getting this wrong, anyone, please correct me on this. This came from Africa and they would make this tea and it was absolutely medicinal. And then around 500 years ago, the transatlantic slave trade starts and they're stealing human beings. They're ripping humans from their homes, from their lands, from their families, from their people, and enslaving them. And alongside the enslaved Africans, they're also now trading spices. So the knowledge of this potent botanical travels alongside stolen Africans inside the hulls of ships across the ocean. And because the Caribbean were the ports upon which all of this trade happened, sorrel, this hibiscus-based drink, becomes a staple across the Caribbean. And because different islands have different import routes, it's made differently from island to island. There's no one way of making it. There's only one way to make sorrel, but there's lots of ways to make sorrel. If you have it in West Africa, they might call it bissap. If you have it in Mexico, they might call it Jamaica. It starts to be imported and they're putting rum in it to add a little bit of stability to it because rum was also a product of the Caribbean. And every island was doing this slightly differently. Again, based on where you fell on the spice route. So if you were, say, in Jamaica, you might get hibiscus and ginger and allspice and cardamom. And if you were deeper in the spice route, like Trinidad and Tobago, you might get East Asian influences in your sorrel, like cinnamon and nutmeg and clove. So it's this delicious beverage that's good for you, that's ceremonial. But what I tell people is the history of our people is in our food, and the history of our people is in our drink. And the story of perseverance is in this beverage. They really did try to destroy our culture. They took our names, they took our bodies, they took our religion, they took our families. But as hard as they tried to destroy this culture, this beverage, it persevered. Humans figured out how to survive. They figured out how to keep their traditions alive. This beverage has been alive for centuries. So when I talk about the product I make, sorrel, it's important for me that folks know this isn't my story. I'm just a steward. I am the person in this generation that gets to make sure that the story of perseverance of my parents and my grandparents who immigrated here and my great-great-grandparents who were born enslaved in the Caribbean and my ancestors before that who came from Africa and who were indigenous, we survived, we persevered. And yes, flavors are important, but the flavor carries our story. And the story is that as much effort went into trying to rid us of our notion of ourselves, we retain those things. We know who we are. We know who we've been, and we know who we're going to be. And that cannot be destroyed and it cannot be maintained. We persevere. Hibiscus persevered, sorrel persevered, and sorrel will persevere. We persevere.
Thank you, Jackie. Powerful and touching as always. would love to hear more about your story, your love of coffee, and how was Naivasha born and what did you learn in the process?
Amazing. So Naivasha Coffee was a little bit of a kind of pandemic hustle for me. Another friend of mine created his own coffee brand out of Australia and gave me the kind of impetus, inspiration, aspiration to do that for myself. Also, towards the end of 2020, I worked really hard to kind of work for myself. So one of the decisions in setting myself up for myself was that a lot of the things that I wanted to do would pay back or pay forward, depending on how you look at it, Kenya. I was born in Nairobi, and I was there till I was maybe 16. English. All my school and university was in England, and then I went off traveling the world and bartending and booze and tales and all of that good stuff. So 24 years later, Kenya over my adulthood, I guess, has become more and more and more important to me. I really want to have a very direct and personal connection with the land. As I've gotten older, it's become more and more important to me to be connected to that side of who I am. So with the coffee brand, I wanted to. I'm a marketeer. I'm not a coffee expert. I'm certainly a coffee consumer, and I've loved coffee all my adult life. But it's been a part of my life from childhood. When I got the kind of confidence, I suppose, and decided to roll the dice and actually create this brand. I wanted to speak to a coffee expert, and I went to speak to a roaster in downtown Los Angeles who I really respect, does a phenomenal job. He's a magician with a coffee bean. And I walked into the roastery, I think it was a Thursday off the top of my head, but it was just a random Thursday. I'm like, hey, I've got this idea. I want to speak to somebody about coffee. I walked in and he said, I don't know why you decided to call today, because 20 minutes ago, I have just finished dialing in our single origin Kenyan coffee. So I'm like, okay, well, let's taste it. And in my brain, we did tasting of 6 coffees. In my brain, I just was not organized for an emotional response to aroma. In the spirits world, in bars and bartending, we talk about aroma and we talk about how evocative it is, and how it triggers memories. Like I've been telling that story and repeating that for years. We got to coffee number 3 and I got really, really emotional. And I couldn't figure out why. And eventually it was because it was the smell of my mum's kitchen in Nairobi when she was making coffee as I was growing up as a toddler, as a kid. And those aromas were so kind of embedded in my brain. And I just had this involuntary emotive response. And that's the coffee that now goes into Naivasha Coffee. The name, as a marketeer, I didn't want to create a kind of stereotypical or cliched African luxury brand. I wanted to create a luxury brand with a Kenyan story, as opposed to an African kind of cliche. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be an extra in The Lion King. I wanted to create like a luxury brand that anybody can emote with or relate to, or want to have a part of, as a part of their, in their kitchen, as a part of their morning ritual. So I called it Naivasha Coffee because my late father, was from the Dorobo tribe, which is from the Rift Valley. So in Kenya, the Rift Valley is this chain of lakes, starting with Naivasha directly west of Nairobi. Just to the north of Lake Naivasha is Lake Nakuru. So my last name is Gakuru. Lake Nakuru is Nakuru. That's the etymology of my last name and my father's you know, and then it opens up and the holographic interior is just something that's fun for me. And then edition 1, I don't know if you can see, but I named it Moja, which is Swahili for one. So each edition will be, there's going to be 4 editions: Moja, Mbili, Nene, Tatu, and Nene, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 in Swahili. So I really love those little details that if you speak Swahili, you're going to see it. If you don't, it's still pronounceable. You're going to figure it out. It's, you know, it's not too confronting. I also put a little Asante Sana, which is Swahili for thank you very much, in the bottom of the box, because I really want, it's a very personal story and personal journey. And then a little info card, which has got details of where the coffee's from, how it's produced, and then a little bit of my kind of life story in the bottom. And then on the back, because we all need espresso martinis in our life, as an espresso martini recipe and affogato. So I really wanted to try and kind of cover off as many things as I possibly could. I wanted to feel luxury. I wanted to feel like a jewel, like a, you know, a prize that you've received, and to make, you know, I wanted to feel good in your hands. So that was really the motivation to create Naivasha Coffee. And then I work with this incredible roaster in downtown Los Angeles. The coffee itself is a pea berry. It's grown in the foothills of Mount Kenya. It's only harvested in November and December in very limited quantities. The Kenyan pea berry makes up less than 1% of Kenya's coffee exports. It really is a very special coffee. A pea berry, for those that don't know, 99.9% of the world's coffee is as you know it. So when you see a coffee bean, it's one coffee bean is actually half of the coffee cherry. So the coffee cherry, the little red cherry, inside that are 2 halves of a seed. The pea berry is just one. So inside each coffee cherry, the pea berry is just 1 seed inside 1 coffee cherry. So that's the principal difference. It's a light roast, and you know, I'm extremely proud of it. It's a very personal journey. It brings together both halves of what make me a whole, i.e. my father's story and my mother's story. So my mother was a coffee drinker, and I've named the brand after where my last name, which I obviously get from my father, where he has come from and his descendants. So it's something that makes me really, really proud. So there's a couple of things with Naivasha Coffee that are special to me. One is I really wanted to focus on the difference between routine and ritual. So making a coffee in the morning, you know, it can be, or driving, you know, to work, your commute every day, you barely need to be present in the moment. You don't need to kind of concentrate. You know, you'll drive your car, you'll get where you need to go, but you don't really need to think. You know, you just leave home and you arrive at work. That's a routine. A ritual is where you are really present in every single moment of a particular activity. When it comes to making a coffee in the morning, we can choose. We can choose to have a routine, or we can choose to have a ritual. With Naivasha Coffee, I really want people to have a ritual. I want you to strive every single morning to focus on one bit of making your coffee in the morning. Is it the grind? I'm going to change the grind a little bit and see what happens. Is it the temperature of the water? Is it the, you know, the time that I allow it to brew, or whatever it might be? And just be present and really enjoy each step of your morning coffee ritual. So change your morning coffee from a routine to a ritual. Be present in every bit of that production process in the morning, and relish in the tiny details and adjusting them every day, you know, considering how you feel that morning and adjusting something about what you do. That's a ritual versus a routine. A routine, you don't need to be present. A ritual, you really need to be present, and you derive pleasure and fulfillment and joy from each step of the process. So that's one thing with Naivasha Coffee. The other, it works really, really well in pour over, and it works really well as espresso. With a pour over, again, take your time. It's not something to rush and kind of run out the door. You know, take your time over it. A medium fine grind for pour over. You want the water at 202 Fahrenheit boiling. you want it boiling, but not furious. So just before the boil. And then you want to, like I say, take your time. It's not something you need to rush and kind of scream out the door. If you're somebody that's like a whirlwind in the morning and you're like, there's kids and, breakfast and, this is a moment for you to step away from all of that, make your Naivasha coffee in the morning, enjoy it, and then go back to the whirlwind. So we just kind of press pause for a couple of minutes. We take our time. We focus on each bit of the, the grind, the temperature of the water, the pour, and the time it takes for that pour. And then you go back to your crazy like morning routine. It works great for espresso. It's a light roast, so it doesn't require additional sweetness. You don't need sugar or agave syrup. Like, it is beautiful. It is Kenyan coffees tend to exhibit notes of blackcurrant, a little citrus, a little peach or stone fruit, versus South American or Caribbean coffees where it tends to be darker and richer and kind of moodier. Kenyan and Ethiopian or East African coffees tend to be roasted light to exhibit these kind of fruitier, citrusy, stone fruity notes. Principal differences with Ethiopian coffee versus Kenyan. A lot of Ethiopian coffee is what's called dry processed, which means the red coffee cherries, they keep the seed inside. They lay out the cherries under the sun to literally dry out. They then shake it to remove the seeds, and the seeds go through another drying process before, and that turns them into the kind of green coffee bean that then gets roasted. Most Kenyan coffee is what's called wet processed. So the coffee cherries are dried. The exterior cascara is removed with water. So a lot of water is used in fresh river water, actually, in my case, or in Naivasha Coffee's case. Fresh river water is used to wash the cascara, the husk of the cherry, away. For edition 1, for Moja edition, the pea berry is then left dried in the sun, and that green coffee is then roasted. So it's a pretty intensive process to get your morning cup of coffee, and that's why I want people to just slow down for a minute. It's taken a long time to get this coffee into this bag and box, and I really would love everybody just to rethink their relationship with the morning coffee, because it's been a journey to get there. I created Naivasha Coffee during the pandemic, so it wasn't open season for travel. So I've kind of got to retrofit the Kenyan piece of the puzzle. So I'm planning to get back to Kenya either late this year or in Q1 next year. I'm going to go to Timu, which is in the foothills of Mount Kenya. Naivasha Coffee comes from a cooperative. Cooperative means that there are thousands of smallholders that maybe have anything from 2 to 20 coffee plants in their, on their smallholding, on their property. Every November and December, they harvest their crop and they take it to a central kind of cooperative. They call it a factory, which I don't like the word factory, but it's Timu factory in the foothills of Mount Kenya. There, all the smallholders are paid by weight of what they produce, and then the coffee is processed consistently by, in my case, Timu factory, and that's where the kind of journey to Los Angeles and roasting in downtown LA begins. Early next year, or late this year, or early next year, I will get back to Kenya once COVID allows, and I will head into the foothills of Mount Kenya. I'm going to have a pro photographer with me, and we're going to go meet the people that have been so gracious as to produce my coffee for me, every November and December. I'd love to go in the harvest season, November, December, but again, some of this global travel is out of my hands.
Sounds like a great adventure ahead. So as a bartender, I would say like former, currently, but once you're a bartender, it stays forever, the playful. What did you discover in terms of like flavor profile when you work with single origin, especially when you work with Naivasha and like the Kenyan style of coffee?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think I'll repeat myself. I'm not a coffee expert. I'm a marketeer, so I'm very passionate about coffee, and I've become a bit of a coffee snob since creating my own, which is good and bad. But in terms of flavor profile, what I've found with single origin is that we're so lucky to have, speaking for myself in Los Angeles, I'm speaking to you now from London. We've got amazing access to products from all over the world, be they coffees or spirits or whatever. So we're able to kind of go on these global kind of taste adventures. And for me, single origin coffee is more about the story than it is the particular flavor profile. It's great because, a lot of work has been done in wine with terroir, and we can say, here's the same grape, but here, this is the same grape on two different sides of the same hill. This one faces south, this one faces east. Here are the different flavor profiles. This is the makeup of the soil, and this has got more flint, this is more clay, like whatever it is. And we're able to kind of discern different differences between the same grape from different sides of the same hill. For me, with single origin, it's kind of like that. I'm able to zoom in to a small, I think it's about 50 square miles, if that, region in the foothills of Mount Kenya, and say, this is what a single origin pea berry from the foothills of Mount Kenya tastes like. So for me, it's about the story. I could create a blended coffee, which would be a lot cheaper, but I don't have, and I could create a particular flavor profile that suits me or reminded me of my childhood or whatever it might be. But for me, I think the power in what I've done with Moja edition, with edition 1, is really tap into my childhood and be able to tell that story. So I'm only able to do that with a single origin, coffee bean from the foothills of Mount Kenya. It was, that's it. Yes, I could create a blend of Colombian and, Kenyan and Sumatran coffee beans, and it would be a third the price. But do I have that story to tell that means something to me that's really, really personal?
This is more about, in general, the ingredients that are stemming from Africa. Where do you think the cocktail world is currently within their understanding and knowledge and use of ingredients such as baobab? Obviously, rooibos is so much more well-known, and hibiscus, but when we look at sorghum and we look at tamarind, and actually, even such ingredients have such regional diversity. How do you see the penetration of African ingredients within the cocktail world and knowledge and the interest from bartenders at large?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing to ponder. I think where right now, as you were like posing the question, my mind goes straight to something like Madagascan vanilla. I think that is such a well-known kind of ingredient in bartending, cocktail bartending. I think Madagascar has done an incredible job of marketing its vanilla, and so that's one that springs to mind. Rooibos, love rooibos, really, really interesting. I think there's a very long way there's a long way to go. There's a long journey for the world to understand what unique and interesting African ingredients are out there. I think that some of the things that I grew up on in Kenya, like ugali, which is a maize meal, is that something that translates to a Western palate? Yes or no? But I think there's definitely a lot of African ingredients and unique flavors and ingredient combinations that are yet to be enjoyed. I look at cuisine around the world, and I'd say out of all of the African countries, obviously there's Saharan Africa, so Morocco, Tunisia, they have unique cuisines that have kind of transported themselves around the world. But beyond that, in sub-Saharan Africa, I would say it was Ethiopia. You know, I live in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, where there's Little Ethiopia. And there's a whole group of incredible, you know, little restaurants that are really popular with a very diverse cross-section of LA society, which is really interesting. So I'm not quite sure why Ethiopian cuisine is the one that has, you know, from sub-Saharan Africa anyway, has managed to land in the US, but and around the world. But I think there's definitely a long way to go. I'm looking at creating my own liquor brand towards the end of this year and into next year. And again, that will be purpose-driven, working with small communities in Kenya. And we will be out in Kenya again, hopefully February, March, or late this year, November, December, sourcing unique Kenyan botanicals to form a part of that brand, so that we can extend the story. We already know that there'll be Kenya coffee and Kenya tea in the mix, and yeah, we'll be looking for weird, wonderful, unique Kenyan ingredients that will add something. It's not just for the sake of it. We need, you know, I'll be seeking out ingredients that bring something beneficial to the table, to the party, so to speak. But I think there's a long way to go for weird, wonderful, and interesting African ingredients from North, South, East, and West Africa.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I totally agree. And I see more people like because we have products that are working like Cameroonian pepper, and people start to understand that there's such a diversity between Cameroonian pepper compared to Cambodian pepper and so on. So there's a plethora. There's so many ingredients that are very, very unique to the continent. So exciting time ahead. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jenna, for putting this all together. I really appreciate it. It's you know, I'm blessed to be invited to several things, you know, with Tales of the Cocktail, and it's just an honor to be asked to participate. And when it's something that I'm as passionate as I am about, you know, the country of Kenya and the continent of Africa, it's a real joy to spend some time with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next would be super great to hear from Reggie. A few insights about yourself, and tell us like what have you been doing and like what flavors you've been working on.
Ooh, guys. So my name is Reginald Mthembu. I'm affectionately known as the happiness agent. My function is to make people happy using luxury spirits. And that's what I wake up and do every day for Diageo. I'm going to be speaking about rooibos as a flavor, local South African grown flavor that we work with in our space. So for me, rooibos, initially my introduction to rooibos was my grandma's tea, because this whole time since I was young, my grandmother would drink rooibos in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evenings, like religiously. Today, she still does the same thing. So it's really important in her lifestyle. But for me, that's my first introduction to rooibos. It was my grandmother's tea. So in terms of the origins of rooibos within the South African space, the first people to discover rooibos was one of our oldest tribes that we have in South Africa, called the Khoisan. Now, the Khoisan is one of the oldest tribes we have in the country. They're well respected, and they're one of the tribes that are masters of foraging, and they're also masters of hunting. Still, even today, they are masters in that field. So they found the rooibos leaf, or the rooibos plant, in the Cape Burger Mountains, which the Kapperberg, sorry, mountains, which are in Cape Town. And when they found them, they originally used them for medicinal purposes. So they'll take the leaves, crush them, make medicine of them, then go into the community and barter with the medicine to get food or to get leather, which they used to make their clothing. So as medicine evolved, the Khoisan slowly moved away from using rooibos as a medicine of some sort, and they went to more traditional medicines. And then at that time, around 1904, there was a Russian immigrant that came to South Africa by the name of Benjamin Ginsberg. So when he came around here, he realized that this herb makes really great tea. So what he did was he substituted what people know as normal tea and took this herb, because rooibos is a herb, it's not true tea. Substituted the normal tea that we have with rooibos and then called it mountain tea. He then had extensive experience already from Chinese tea and tea from India. So he was able to then put together the fields that were required to farm the rooibos. So that's how basically rooibos got commercialized and started moving into other countries. That's one of the catalysts, one of the guys that actually commercialized it and then pushed it into other spaces. But it was more his grandson who took it to other countries. That's basically, in a nutshell, how rooibos was discovered and its evolution, as it were, to how we know it now. So a few facts about rooibos is that rooibos is a herb and not a true tea, as some people would know. Rooibos is also, it also contains polyphenols that have anti-inflammatories, antivirals, and anti-mutagen qualities that help you as a human. So most of the elderly people will have a lot of rooibos because it helps them with such. Then it's also seen as a stress reliever. It helps with nervous tension. It helps with hypertension conditions. So that's some of the stuff that you get from the rooibos from almost a medical point of view. And then shifting from all of that, from the history and the medical point of view, coming to our space where we make people emotional with drinks, we start having fun, we start lighting up, where it's a totally different world. We in the bartending industry have a few techniques that we use, or a few ways that we use to extract flavors. So one of them, which is the easiest, is basically using hot or cold water to infuse, so to try and extract flavor. So when you use cold water, you'll find that it's not as, it takes a while for the taste to be as tannic, so, or as bitter, because you're using cold water and you put your tea back there. But if you're using hot water and you put it for say 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it starts becoming really tannic. So a cool way of describing rooibos tea for me is like a pianist. Pianist sits still, but still gives you symphonies of really cool sounds that you can pick up, and you're like, hey, actually, this flavor is not as quiet as we thought. It's actually a beast. It's just that it presents itself in a very shy way, if I can put it like that, because rooibos as a herb that becomes a tea is not as potent unless you put it in, obviously, as I said, you put it in boiling water and it extracts a lot of flavors and ends up becoming really tannic, as it were. So that's the easiest way of extracting flavors. Another way of extracting flavors that's also really cool and easy is just using spirits. So taking the herb and infusing it into a spirit. So for instance, taking the rooibos, putting it into the Johnnie Walker Black to infuse a bit of rooibos inside there, then possibly making a Johnnie Walker Black highball with that. So those are some of the things that you can do to extract flavors, to play with rooibos from a bartending point of view. So in terms of local impact, rooibos is really huge in South Africa. In terms of farming alone, which is the production side of rooibos, it employs about 8,000 farmers in terms of production. It's also become one of the biggest export ingredients that we have in the country. And we export mostly, so the country that we export to the most is Germany, So the latest stats that I have, which is 2019, before the lockdown and everything, we exported about 21 million kilograms of rooibos only to Germany. And Germany's the one country we export to the most. Then number 2 is Japan. Then you have the UK coming through. Then it's Sri Lanka. Then it's the USA. Then it's China. So we have a lot of countries that we export to, and we export a lot of the rooibos ingredients to these different countries in a tea format, as it were. We are also accredited with the EU in terms of organic certification, social certification, sustainability certification. Those are the few certifications that we have and we are accredited for when it comes to rooibos. And rooibos is a really, looking at how I thought about it before as I was growing up my whole life, that it's my grandmother's tea, to what I know now, it's really a shift in paradigm for me, and it has presented really awesome flavors. I recently played with a Manhattan. I did a spin on the Manhattan. So I got a rooibos vermouth, cardu, roasted peach syrup, and a bit of bitters, which is cool, light flavors, fruity flavors. So for me, it's really astonishing that such a soft giant, as it were, can really play so well with other flavors when you're actually making things like cocktails and things like that. So I'll share some of the recipes with you guys, but I hope I've broadened your understanding of rooibos, where it came from, scientifically, how it's positioned, bar-wise, in terms of the industry, and what we do, what I do as the happiness agent, how we're looking at it there, in terms of community impact, what it has done for the country, and some of the drinks that you guys can have at home. Cool, that is it for me.
Sounds delicious, Reggie. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, totally will be following. Next one will be really great to hear from Tunde. Now, I read a lot of his commentary on Instagram, and I find it always really interesting and food for thought. So, Tunde, please take over and chat to us. I'm very keen to listen to you.
Yeah, this is like so great to hear from everybody. I'm gonna keep this brief because I think I do better with like responding to conversations or to questions. So I'll keep this brief. I think my interest is in examining our capitalist system. And so when I think about food as, say, a cultural product. And we all know that's true. And I think we also like build myths around what that means and how food, I guess, unifies us or divides us. But I think fundamentally, food or drink, like these things are commodities in a capitalist system, and they're being traded. And this capitalist system is not just a capitalist system, it's sort of like a racial capitalist system, meaning that the consequences of these transactions that happen is exploitation, and these exploitations combined always seem to disadvantage people of color, Black folks in the diaspora, Black folks in the continent. So what that means is the entire continent. So when I think about the work that I'm trying to do with Iru, which is fermented locust beans, I think about not just what is possible, because I think very little is possible if we're trying to change this system, but what we can say with the product. And I'm not as interested in how beneficial something is nutritionally, but how we can use food or drink to begin to ask questions about the choices that we make around consumption. I'm working on another project that has to do with drink, actually. I'm working to import spirits from Nigeria to the US and sell it to sell it here. And thinking about the infrastructure necessary to import stuff and export stuff, thinking about why Nigeria and Africa is really fundamentally disadvantaged by Forex, right? So when there's an appreciation in the dollar, that affects the economies of places like Nigeria. So these things are the things that I think about. These are the things that make me curious about how we can change systems. I want to try and collect as much money as possible. I want to make as much money as possible so that I can change the material realities of the folks that are around me and my communities, but also so that I can fund some sort of revolution that can change everything that is bigger than what is around me. And so that's the way that I think about food. And I think about this literally, like how can I make money so that we can literally fund a revolution? Not like how can I make money so that I can think about sharing the continent or ingredients with other people, but like there needs to be a literal revolution. Well, the world is imbalanced, and the imbalance favors the white West, to use a term that Zoe used, and that's true. And to like speak to what Jackie said about the historical dispossession of African folks, that shit is happening right now, currently. It's not a historical fact. Like every consumption choice that we make, when I say we, folks on the, in the West here, every consumption choice that we make invariably affects negatively folks on the continent, invariably affects negatively Black and brown folks in the West as well. It affects working class people too. So my work and my goal and how I think about food, how I think about beverage is how do we shift resources, redistribute resources to folks who don't have them, not just don't have them, but whose resources have been taken from them. And then how do we begin to fund a revolution, like an intellectual revolution? There are degrees of ethics that are possible. And so there are some products that you can choose that are, say, maybe more ethically sourced than other products. But when you sort of think about not just the specific product, but the web of relationships around that production, you find that everything in this system is exploitative. So I don't think there's a magical product that is from the continent that can be produced in a way that is not exploitative. It's just not possible. And if it is possible, give it time and it will become impossible. So I'm less interested in any particular product that can be an example of ethical production, but I'm interested in products that we can use to make a point about the dispossession of Black folks, the dispossession of folks on the continent, and products that we can use to accumulate considerable capital that can, either help to fund our rebuilding as a people, as a continent, and also help to fund this revolution that is necessary, that requires some action and some resources.
Thanks, I understand. So your approach is very much focused on storytelling and on fundraising towards redistributing. Yeah, great. Thanks, Tunde. Next, we have Seth Awesome. Seth, you're a big storyteller and lover of ingredients in Africa, so would really love to know more about you, what you're doing in Lagos.
So my name is Seth Awesome. I like to be called Afro-tender because I incorporate local African heritage and culture into SAFs, basically. So one of these ingredients that is close to my heart that I'll be talking about today is the songu, which is locally known as the guinea corn. So the Guinea corn is popularly planted in the northeast and the north central in Nigeria. This is one ingredient that is highly consumed because of its nutrients. You don't be surprised that we had a lot of phosphorus, zinc, a lot of vitamin, a lot of D2 in this distinctive grains. I mean, there are several ways you can enjoy this sorghum. It could be grounded into flour, it could be made into meal, and then it could be made into alcohol, like a normal beverage. We have a beverage in Nigeria that is made from sorghum that is called the burukutu. This is a local brew beer, in the sense that it has a lot of story attached to my ancestors and my forefathers, in the sense that before we could literally have beers in here, we were having like the local brew beer, which is called the brukutu. Before, like, we had Guinness here, we're having like brukutu over here. So how my ancestors were able to do this is because the sila, this plant is actually it's very rich in nutrients. It's full packed with a lot of nutrients. And then what they do is basically ground it into flour and then have water, like boiled water, and then ferment it for a couple of days. And then after this fermentation that happens in like 3 days, you can then have it and then enjoy it. When you have it, you just feel like you're having like the normal brew stouts. And then you can actually enjoy it again by using like doing it in a non-alcoholic way. So how you do this is just get like a dried ginger, and then you get dried sweet potato, and then you get some spicy local spice. If you can literally want to alternate that with like alligator pepper, or you use cloves. And then what you do, and then your Guinea corn, which is the sorghum. So how you do this is just basically ground this and then turn a little bit of water in it, and then you boil water. After boiling this water, you then turn it inside, and then you turn it within hours, it will turn like pap. After the pap level, you have to make it, you turn it very well. And then when it turns to like pap, you keep it on the side. Then you do another infusion, which is then the dried potato, and then the dried ginger, and then the cloves together. You do that again, you turn it into a pap. And then basically you turn the both pap together, and then you stir it together. You leave it overnight. The next morning, it then becomes very liquid. You can then sieve that, and you can then drink that. And then my people take that to be a very strong nutrient giver. It could, when you take this, if you lost energy, you can regain your energy back and stuff. And gather with the fact that it has a lot of story attached to my forefathers and my ancestors, I like to incorporate these local Nigerian grown grains into my beverage, in the sense that Nigeria is actually rated as the second producing countries around the world. I could bet you we produce more of the sorghum compared to the US, that is rated like the highest one that exports this. I think with over time, my people will get to realize the fact that we have a lot of good Nigerian flavors that we can actually walk around with. Sorry, I am very very happy sharing this story with you today, because this is one like ingredient that I grew up knowing. I never knew they have beer, but I grew up knowing like that is songo, there's brukutu, that you can always enjoy. That is kunu zaki, which is popularly known in the northeast and the north central in Nigeria, that is highly consumed. Before I know that there is Red Bull, I knew there is kunu zaki to always have to give you enough of nutrients for you to have your day run through. So this is one story like I feel telling, and because it's a lot of things attached to my ancestors and then my culture as a person. Thank you very much.
That was awesome, Seth. It's kind of in the name. Hi, Sheldon. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for the platform. My name's Sheldon Raju. I was born in South Africa. I spent most of my young years hanging out there, cooking and traveling. in and around Africa, southern continent. But yeah, myself personally, I'm a chef. I've been in the industry. Actually, I hate telling people I'm a chef. I like to say I'm a cook, but I'm a chef by trade. I've qualified. I went to chef school straight after school. I was lucky to go to a nice little international school in a place called Valley of 1,000 Hills in little KwaZulu-Natal, which is a beautiful province on like the eastern part of Africa. I spent most of my years though working down in Cape Town in South Africa, and most people know it's just a bustle and hub. It's the Europe of Africa, as they say, or like any European city. So it was good, and I spent some years working up in Europe. I was very lucky to be sent over to go work in a few Michelin stars. Spent some time in England, spent some time in Germany, Amsterdam, and then now I see myself in America. So I've done the whole East Coast in the last 4 years, so all the way from the Bahamas, the Caribbean, all the way up to Nova Scotia, and now on the West Coast, basically just traveling through this way and just sourcing ingredients as I go and learning about new ingredients and cultures, and yeah. So working in Cape Town, I was in a very cool spot, a really good restaurant, and it was cool. Like they were hiring people of color even for South Africa. That was a very new thing actually. After apartheid, it slowly transcended into restaurants, and people were given opportunities to work in really fine dining establishments. Color wasn't a thing. It was great. We got to work with different cultures, European, African, all mingling in the one place, and got to see like how different ingredients like we use locally, how that transcended onto like the fine dining plate as well. So we spent years researching through like different routes, markets. I would find myself in some scary situations through some of these little markets, but it was always fun. You got to learn about different cultures and traditional, more like also not just like how food and like what that represents for us in the Western world, but like what food also represents in the African world, the African palate, and like the gathering of societies. How food is almost a celebration in Africa. I always, wherever I go, I try to take that with me. I can't take the ingredients always, which always sucks, but it's nice that I used to have my sister back home and she ships me some stuff whenever I need. But look, traveling the world, I get to find out about like new African ingredients, because Africa is just huge. South Africa was just a small part of it. But we held I think that reigns as the culinary capital because it was accessible to a lot of Europeans. It always has been through the spice routes and trade routes. That has always been a thing that's developed that country. And I think it developed Africa, it developed the world. For me, the best spices are still from Africa. I feel like the spice route is still like holds its roots very firmly and to the ground back home. And yeah, it's hard to let go of that. One ingredient you mentioned earlier, tamarind, that you find all across, like, up into Madagascar, down all the way into the Bahamas, in the Caribbean, and, further afield, Sri Lanka. So like, it's crazy how one specific ingredient doesn't really hold any more boundaries. It's just us in our mindset.
Like how is tamarind within South Africa? How would you use it? Any advice that you have for like bartenders?
So in South Africa, tamarind is very much just used in like Indian cooking. I know for some special sauces as well, like Mrs. Paul's chutney, which is a South African thing that the aunt guys go crazy for. It has tamarind, but tamarind is a seed pod, and what it essentially is the pulp you're using. And that pulp actually is a soury fine kind of flavor. And I know people like think sour, but sour in Africa is a very strong flavor. Like through injera, you would see it as well. All the way up even into like the like Nigeria when they're cooking. I know their curries, they have a bit of sourness to it, and I think in the Western world that's looked down upon in the in our type of cultures, it's more for flavor, and that's we become used to. So tamarind is always great. I think if you ever want to balance something that's too sweet, I use it a lot. We use it in our crab curries back home, in our fish curries. So sometimes if the shellfish or the fish is like, just raised for too long, it's a bit too sweet, they would add a bit of tamarind in to balance the flavor. It's also really good for your soul. Is that what my granny says? And it's interesting to use different senses as well in the way how our profile and our taste buds have changed. Sometimes even if you didn't want maybe I've seen chefs do this with certain dishes. You don't want your tamarind, if you don't want your curry too sour, so they've literally taken the tamarind out on the table, popped it open in front of the guests so they could see what a tamarind pod will look like. Because I guarantee you, if you don't, you would just think it comes in a little block in the shop and then you just, that's it. But it's quite a process, So it's important to research these things, where these ingredients come from. So my little understanding of my culture and how we came about of Indians developing in Africa and our influence on the food, on the flavor profile of the African soil. We came all as slaves, basically across India, and with that there was a lot of like conflict in itself. Different religions, different cultures, all mingling on ships, very smallly, tightly knit. They were always just one cook that had to like service a lot of families. So it became very simplified, the cooking. They developed a cooking technique called puna, and making masalas and spices, of grinding different mixtures. And this became like synonymous throughout like different households that would like call it the mother-in-law mix, or like the special, like, get your ex-girlfriend back type of masala mix, and they would hand it to each parcel, or each mother would make it and give it to their son as they will, like, wherever they went. The masala, as I spoke earlier, is used though throughout all African cultures as well. I've noticed in different curry powders that are developed. And those simple like flavors are hard to extract sometimes, and people struggle to get the real understanding. I feel like, oh, I'm making a curry, but it comes out like a stew. But like essentially the cooking techniques that were used on the ships that used by slaves were the same cooking techniques that were used on the land that when we landed on, that we used prior to us, that we used, what people had necessity, because Africa was a tough land to live in. Growing up, I got to see how that little has changed in that, and how much sharing has still like transcended between those cultures through food. We love each other's food. We appreciate each other's food, and the palate, I would say, has Indian food. If you come to South Africa and you think you're going to go to an Indian person's food and have Indian food, you'll be shocked. You'll be sitting at an African household and you'll have a great meal in front of you with very traditional staples as well. As I mentioned, the white pap, the mealie meal. We need to realize we have to stay together. Like, that's important. It was at a stage where it could have been like almost broken down, and Nelson Mandela was a hero and he came out and he saved us, but he's gone now, and it's really up to us to be those heroes for the next generation. So we try to do what we can in our country, even though I'm far away. It's been tough times recently. I just hope for better.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all this with you, and thanks so much for like joining me, guys, into this. I think there's like almost like there's room for conversation. So if everybody has any notes or anything to add, we have a few more minutes, so feel free to take the mic and add. I am just very excited to see in the chat that people connect, because this year's Tales is all about community. So that's really nice for me to like see that everybody kind of connects and is curious. And hopefully Tunde is going to go to Seth's bar in Lagos.